right. Good afternoon, everyone. I will just address all of you this morning in English, and I'm going to have my colleague, the Premier of Quebec, François Legault, indicate the similar statement en français. So it is indeed an honor and a pleasure for me to host my Premier colleagues from right across the country, right here in Winnipeg, and share our annual Council of Federation meeting. Canada's premiers are meeting for the 20th anniversary of COF as an organization, and we remain committed to our ongoing purpose to advance common ground on the issues that matter to most Canadians across the country, from coast to coast to coast. These issues involve services delivered by provinces and territories, resource development driven by provinces and territories, and economic growth and job opportunities also led by provinces and territories. How Canada's premiers collaboratively work on these shared priorities is fundamentally important, and how we engage and advocate together with our partners in the federal government matters to all Canadians. We work together to strengthen our country, to respect our diversity, and improve the lives of all of the people right across this country that we serve. So our discussions today were focused on building stronger communities for all Canadians, beginning with shared public safety challenges arising from violent crime in our communities right across the country, and the need for overdue and increasingly urgent action by the federal government to reform the Federal Criminal Code of Canada. The federal government cannot further delay necessary bail reform. People in every province and territory should not have to wait any longer. We cannot afford to wait longer for better protection from random violence caused by repeat and dangerous offenders, and to better target criminals using guns and other weapons. Provinces and territories are doing our part on more law enforcement to combat crime, on gangs, on domestic and partner-based violence, and on more investments for mental health and addiction supports. But we need necessary federal follow-through on federal criminal code reform, and we need it now. We also talked about the ongoing affordability challenges faced across the country, the rising cost of essentials, and on housing challenges. And of course, we talked about the continuing efforts we're all making to improve our healthcare systems across the country. The healthcare action plans that we're advancing in each of our areas, how we can continue to support the healthcare workforces, the work we're doing on retention, on recruitment, and credential recognition. And other key areas that we touched on today include building a stronger labor force and our work on labor market challenges, and ensuring our Arctic security and sovereignty. Our communiqué from today speaks to all of these issues and to the mutual commitment of all premiers to further action in each of these areas. Our meeting will continue tomorrow with more of a focus on a number of issues relating to economic growth and opportunities. And now I'd like to hand it over to Premier Legault to say a few words en français. Thank you.
Donc, merci Heather, merci donc Première ministre Stefanson. Merci d'abord pour l'accueil chaleureux qu'on a eu depuis dimanche ici. C'est magnifique. Évidemment, c'est toujours un plaisir de se retrouver les premiers ministres des provinces et des territoires. D'abord, pour comparer un peu nos défis dans chacune des provinces et territoires. Donc, on a parlé beaucoup de sujets. Peut-être le sujet dont on a parlé le plus aujourd'hui, c'est toute la question autour de la sécurité concernant donc une réforme qu'on demande au gouvernement fédéral déjà depuis un certain temps pour revoir le système de libération sous caution. On a vu nous-mêmes au Québec, malheureusement, là, une de nos policières, Maureen Brault, qui a été tuée par un récidiviste. Bon, on fait des gestes, les provinces, les territoires, mais on doit changer le code criminel. Puis il y a un projet de loi qui a été déposé, la loi C-48, et on demande au gouvernement fédéral d'accélérer donc l'adoption de cette loi. C'est important qu'on revoie les critères lorsqu'on libère des gens qui ont fait de la prison, s'assurer qu'il y a le moins possible, évidemment, de risques pour la population. J'ai demandé aussi, puis on a accepté d'appuyer, tous les premiers ministres ont accepté d'appuyer cette proposition que j'ai faite pour revoir aussi la loi C-5 qui a été adoptée en novembre dernier. Depuis 2007 au Québec, on avait, quand il y a des crimes sexuels, ça ne pouvait pas être une peine dans la communauté ou à la maison. Malheureusement, par contre, puis je ne pense pas qu'il y avait de mauvaise foi de ce côté-là, quand on a adopté le projet de loi C-5 au mois de novembre dernier, on a permis aux juges de donner des peines à la maison. Et au Québec, depuis le début de l'année, il y a eu 5 cas où des gens, des hommes, qui ont commis des actes de violence sexuelle, qui ont malheureusement reçu seulement des peines à la maison. Au Québec, on appelle ça les peines Netflix. Ça a choqué les Québécois. Donc, on demande au gouvernement fédéral aussi de faire ce changement à la loi C-5. On a parlé aussi, bien sûr, de l'inflation, du logement. C'est un problème majeur à la grandeur du Canada. On a donc un manque de logements, puis on a aussi des logements dont le prix a augmenté très rapidement. Donc, il y a un problème d'accès au logement. Donc, on demande ensemble au gouvernement fédéral de simplifier les programmes, d'augmenter l'aide, d'accélérer les délais. Donc, ça, c'était un autre sujet qui a été discuté. On a parlé, bien sûr, aussi de santé. Donc, on a comparé nos défis. On a fait le suivi sur ce sujet qui a été traité souvent aux réunions du Conseil de la Fédération. On a parlé aussi de pénurie de main-d'œuvre, d'immigration. Bon, j'ai eu quand même l'occasion d'expliquer qu'au Québec, on a une entente spéciale sur l'immigration parce qu'on a un défi de protéger le français au Québec. Donc, c'est pour ça qu'on a des pouvoirs que d'autres provinces n'ont pas. Mais je comprends que les autres provinces aimeraient avoir plus de pouvoir en termes d'immigration. Puis même si on en a plus au Québec, nous aussi, on voudrait avoir plus de pouvoir en immigration. Puis finalement, on a parlé de la sécurité de l'Arctique, donc les territoires au nord du Canada. Merci.
Questions?
Hi, Ashley Burke, CBC News. Premier Legault, why haven't you signed on, like all the other provinces and territories, on a healthcare deal with the federal government? What are you waiting for?
Okay, first we want to make sure that because it's a jurisdiction of province of Quebec in this case, so we don't want to have priorities that are different than the actual plan that is in place. But I don't expect much problem, and we already started receiving the money from the federal government. So I don't expect that we have problem finding ways to make sure that this money goes with the Quebec plan.
Why do you want conditions dropped when other provinces and territories are going to have to follow those conditions?
But I think that each deal is different. Each deal has been negotiated, so I cannot talk about the other deals. But regarding our deal, it's important for us. We already have a plan. We already have our priorities. So we want the money coming from the federal government to be focused on our priorities. I guess that Heather may answer what she negotiated.
Yeah, no, sure. I think you covered it off, Premier, and I think really what it is that each of us in our jurisdictions have our own priorities in those areas, and so we are negotiating for our bilats based on our local priorities. So it's really no different. Quebec is doing their thing. All the different provinces are doing their own things unique to what they are facing within their provinces and the territories as well.
Bonjour, Sébastien Desrosiers de Radio-Canada. Ma question est pour M. Legault. Vous avez fait un plaidoyer hier en faveur de Bombardier, mais il y a certains de vos collègues qui ont sur leur territoire des installations de Boeing, l'entreprise contre qui Bombardier serait en compétition dans ce cas-ci. Est-ce que vous sentez qu'un consensus peut se former autour de cette question-là ou il y a des fissures qui pourraient apparaître dans le front commun?
Bon. D'abord, c'est un sujet qui est prévu à l'agenda demain, donc ce n'est pas un sujet qu'on a discuté aujourd'hui. Deuxièmement, ce qu'on demande, puis c'est clair, là, c'est de permettre à Bombardier de pouvoir déposer une proposition. Donc, je comprends qu'il y a une proposition actuellement de Boeing. Il y a effectivement des installations de Boeing au Canada. Il y a aussi des installations de Bombardier au Canada. Bon, Bombardier prétend qu'il y aurait plus de retombées, mais tout ce qu'on demande, c'est que la meilleure proposition soit retenue. Donc, on demande juste de dire, est-ce que le gouvernement fédéral peut étudier, peut faire un appel d'offres plutôt que de signer un contrat gré à gré avec Boeing. Mais ça va être discuté demain.
OK. Puis... Ben, juste un follow-up. En fait, je m'en voudrais juste de ne pas vous parler des inondations qui ont lieu au Québec.
Oui.
Rapidement, il y a des évacuations, près de 800 personnes là, à Sherbrooke, dans la région de Québec. Qu'est-ce que fait le gouvernement? Puis est-ce que vous êtes un peu démoralisé de voir qu'après les feux, là, c'est l'eau qui gâche la vie des Québécois? Bien,
écoutez, effectivement, il y a la capitale nationale puis l'Estrie qui sont touchés. Donc, on a des personnes à Sainte-Brigitte-de-Laval, on suit de près la rivière Saint-François en Estrie. On s'assure que les personnes qui sont évacuées soient bien logées temporairement. Puis, on est quand même optimiste que les problèmes se règlent assez rapidement.
Lindsay Gay, Radio-Canada, Manitoba. My question is for Heather Stefanson. What did you think of the healthcare rally that took place today in front of the Fort Garry at noon?
Well, first of all, we had a great breakfast started early this morning with the Manitoba Nurses Union as well as the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions across the country. And I can tell you we had a good dialogue this morning about some of the challenges that they're facing, and it was great to listen and learn from them. And of course, everyone has their right to freedom of speech, and they're expressing that. And so I have no problem with that at all, and I can say that from that, and we had a great discussion today on healthcare within our own provincial areas and territorial areas about how we can work together, learn best practices from other jurisdictions as well. And so I think it was a positive day today.
Bonjour, Thomas Laberge pour la presse canadienne. Une question pour M. Legault. Ben, en fait, je vais poursuivre sur Bombardier parce qu'hier, vous avez dit que vous vouliez avoir en fait l'appui de tous vos collègues. Je comprends que ça va être discuté demain, mais vous connaissez les journalistes, on a pris de l'avance, donc on a posé des questions à vos collègues avant. Et comme le disait mon collègue, le consensus semble être difficile à avoir. Est-ce que ça vous prend absolument ce consensus-là pour faire la demande au fédéral?
Non, on a déjà fait la demande au fédéral, Doug Ford et moi. Il y a des installations importantes en Ontario puis au Québec, mais il y en a aussi dans des provinces maritimes puis dans l'ouest du Canada. Mais ce qu'on demande, c'est pas de donner absolument le contrat à Bombardier, c'est de permettre à Bombardier de déposer une offre. Donc, que la meilleure gagne, mais qu'on compare l'offre de Bombardier avec l'offre de Boeing sur le prix, sur les retombées, sur l'ensemble de l'œuvre. Mais ça va être discuté demain.
Mais entre vous et moi, vous aimeriez que Bombardier gagne
Bien,
cet appel
écoutez,
d'offres?
je pense qu'il y a plus de retombées, mais évidemment, il y a une question de prix. Je sais qu'il y a une question aussi de délai. Bombardier veut utiliser le Global 6500, le transformer. On parle de quelques années. Bombardier pense que ça respecte les délais qui sont demandés par la Défense nationale. Donc, on va regarder les pour et les contre, mais pourquoi ne pas permettre à une compagnie canadienne, québécoise, de déposer une offre?
Merci.
Hi, Jeff Keel, CTV Winnipeg. Premier Stefanson, you talked about one of the issues today is improving healthcare was talked about. Things like retention, recruitment. We heard outside, obviously, and I'm sure you heard it today about burnout with workers. You're asking the premiers are asking the federal government, obviously, for help. The money's not enough. What solutions are the premiers coming up with at this meeting? You talk about shared ideas. What are the premiers coming up with to help fix healthcare?
You know, thanks for that, Jeff, and a good question. I think we started off, today with the breakfast meeting with the nurses' unions and had that dialogue with them. We then had a discussion amongst all of us, the premiers in all the provinces and territories, about next steps. We need to recognize, obviously, that the money that came from the federal government represents just a mere 2% of the overall budgets within the provinces and territories, and even less actually for the territories. And so that's a significant challenge, but we also recognize that we need to get together again and have a discussion about how we can share best practices, what is working in some provinces, and that we can learn from in other provinces. And so we have agreed to have another standalone meeting on how we can share the knowledge across jurisdictions right across the country sometime later this year.
When this year? Do you have an idea?
Sometime later this year.
Thank you.
Hi, Carol Sanders, Free Press.
Hi, Carol.
Premier, just staying on the healthcare track, could you talk a little bit about the use of private agency nurses? Today, in an interview, the MNU president talked about Quebec reducing the reliance on public or private agency nurses. Is that something that was discussed, and is that something that the province is looking at, or all provinces are looking at?
Well, certainly something that came up at our breakfast this morning, so we're listening to those stakeholders within our healthcare systems right across the country. These are the types of things: retention, recruitment, more training for nurses as well as other healthcare professionals. In Manitoba, we have a $200 million investment in this very area to attract more than 2,000 new healthcare professionals to the province of Manitoba. We're well over halfway there, and so we've got some things in our province, obviously, that is moving in that direction. When it comes specifically to agency nurses, we're listening, and if there's better ways we can do things, then we'll listen to those ways. But I think the most important thing is that we're delivering health care within all of our jurisdictions to those citizens who need it when they need it.
And what about the use of incentives? Are the premiers talking about ways to avoid poaching healthcare workers from other provinces? We've heard, Saskatchewan, for instance, has been notorious, we've heard, for poaching Manitoba nurses. And I'm just wondering if that's something premiers have talked about, ways to avoid that. And, provinces with less resources to pay for hiring more nurses or attracting them or drawing them away. Is that something that the premiers have talked about, a way to sort of level the playing field or to avoid that incentive to poach?
Yeah, well, one of the things, then I just did mention that we will be getting together for another meeting on healthcare and how we can share best practices so that we can take a collaborative approach when it comes to recruitment, retention, and training of healthcare professionals across the country. So that will be one of the items for discussion.
Iris Dick, Global News. You mentioned building a stronger labor force. I know, Mr. Legault, you talked about immigration. Oh, sorry, it's for Stefanson. Just how much of your discussion was about retention? I know when you have the nurses union outside saying that they had a discussion like this with you last year, and the same issues still seem to be present.
Well, I think we've made significant headway, frankly, but I think also we're listening, we're learning. What can we do better? How can we do it better? We're not afraid to have those conversations. That's why we're all there right across the country, listening to nurses and this morning, and about how we can do things better. So we'll continue to learn from other stakeholders, but I think we are taking action and we are getting results. We recognize, obviously, that there's more to do, and we'll continue to listen to those stakeholders on improving things.
Janice McGregor from CBC News. Just straddling today's conversation on housing with some of the economic conversations tomorrow. A question for either of you, actually. In May, the Prime Minister signaled there's a big infrastructure program coming from the federal government, suggested it would be very much centered on the housing crisis, addressing that. Much like the conversation on healthcare money, would the provinces accept conditions, strings, from the federal government for how infrastructure money is to be transferred to the provinces, particularly, for example, for the housing crisis?
Well, first of all, on infrastructure, we've been calling on the federal government for an ISIP kind of 2.0 program, and we understand that they're coming out with things. Every jurisdiction is unique, and I think what we need is a national strategy when it comes to infrastructure, and we're willing to have that conversation. We want to move in that direction. We will be having discussions around that tomorrow. We did have discussions today around housing, and again, each jurisdiction is, has its own unique challenges. And that's why when there's strings attached, it doesn't always help all communities and all provinces and territories right across the country. So today we discussed, really what is unique between the different provinces and the territories. And I think when we're looking at a federal funding program, we need to ensure that it's helping and making sure, we're identifying what is needed in each of our jurisdictions, and we're looking for help and support from them in partnership to ensure that we get the results that we need within our own jurisdictions.
Monsieur Legault, sur les conditions, oui or no?
Same thing.
Same. Is that a no then on conditions? You don't want strings?
Like Heather said, what is important is the end result, to see more housing. So the federal government has to be flexible, respect our jurisdiction, stop doing business directly with municipalities. So make things easier, not tougher.
Okay, so just what you said there, you don't appreciate them going around you straight to the municipalities. But to follow on that, I understand some business lobbies who are in town to talk to you, especially tomorrow, are saying that we can't define infrastructure only as housing, that there's a desperate need for transportation infrastructure, rail infrastructure, that is of critical importance. So if we're going to get a big federal spend on infrastructure, is it okay to put it all towards housing, or do you want to see some of it go to, supply chain infrastructure?
We absolutely want to see more going towards trade infrastructure, and we will be having more of a discussion on that tomorrow, so I will await until after we have that discussion. But it is critical, and it shouldn't be one or the other, quite frankly, and it shouldn't be one at the expense of the other. We have, unique challenges right across the country, but I think we can also work together towards a national trade infrastructure strategy, which has been long overdue in our country. Again, I look forward to talking to my colleagues tomorrow more about that.
All right,
Thanks, everyone.
Merci tout le monde.